Hey everybody, Arnaldo here, broadcasting from Fidelios Frequency. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to another episode of the journey into Vinyl Me Please and their records of the month. So today we'll be taking a look at the records of the month for the month of February 2024, and two are the categories that I am currently subscribed to. The rock category, and this month the rock category features Hootenanny, the album by The Replacements. And we'll also take a look at the Essentials category, which features this month the self-titled album by Fleetwood Mac. We'll leave this one for last because I'm doing a little bit more of a deeper dive into it because I did a mini comparison to another version that I have. So I guess we'll start off with Hootenanny by The Replacements. One of the first things that I noticed when I got these selections is Vinyl Me Please has slightly revamped their presentation of their releases. They used to have a hype sticker here. Now the hype sticker is gone on both of the selections that I got this month, and that information is now carried on to the Obi, which has all the information from the hype sticker. It tells us that the lacquers were cut by Ryan Smith at Sterling Sound, pressed on 180 gram vinyl, and pressed, it's actually blue vinyl. There's also a listening booklet, which we'll briefly go over. But the first thing that you probably noticed is there's no mention on the source. So the assumption is they probably cut these lacquers from a digital source. So not a AAA all analog release this time. Also, I noticed that now they're putting a little bit more care into actually coloring the inside of the Obi, so doing some style changes here at Vinyl Me Please. I wanted to show you the booklet. The booklet is actually very basic, no additional photos. It's all in black and white with just text and a really informative essay, especially for me, because, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And let's take a look at the album. Glossy, heavy cardboard, tip-on jacket, and the Vinyl Me Please rock in purple, floral purple. And let's take a look at the vinyl. Comes, of course, in our usual polyline sleeve. Original twin tone labels on blue vinyl. Now let's talk a little bit more about the record, the release. I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with The Replacements, which up until now was pretty much null, because I never really explored their music, even though back in the 90s, I want to say, I'm a big REM fan, and Michael Stipe, I remember reading how he said that the best band from the 80s was The Replacements, and that kind of stuck in my mind. I've always wanted to explore their catalog, listen to their music, and I'm very familiar with all the album covers. I flipped through them many times in record stores. I just never picked any of them up, nor have I streamed any. So when this selection of the month was announced, I was actually on the fence about starting off with Hootenanny, even though it is their second album. I knew that they were a bit more punk, maybe a little more raw in their earlier stages before they signed to a major label, so I wasn't sure I wanted to start off with this, but I streamed it and I actually liked it a lot, so that's why I decided to keep the selection, not swap it for another or for store credit, which Vinyl Me Please allows you to do. And when I received it, I've listened to it a couple times already, and I liked it more listening to it at home rather than when I streamed it at work, or I believe it was during my commute. So I'm pleasantly surprised and actually very pleased that I stuck with it and I really enjoy it. Granted, I did some homework and the essay was very informative. The essay gives you a little bit of a rundown of the Replacements' career up until Hootenanny. and it gives a little bit of a retrospective in the context in which the album was recorded. So definitely I learned from the booklet, as well as doing some research online to kind of catch myself up to speed to the Replacements. And this is their second album. It came out in 1983. And like I mentioned before, they had more of a punk background on their first album, and I believe they also released an EP in between. This album represents them branching out into other genres. All of the members of the Replacements, of course, let's name them: Paul Westerberg on vocals, guitar, and main songwriter; two brothers, the two Stinson brothers, Bob and Tommy, on lead and on bass guitar, and Chris Mars on drum. They're all featured here in the back. And all of the band members, as I said, had various tastes in music. So they were bringing those influences and those tastes into the recording of the second album. That's why we see them branching out into different genres, starting from blues, country, garage, electropop, and yeah, I think those are kind of the eclectic genres that they touched upon. And of course, yes, still their punk roots. And the first thing that actually came to mind when I listened to them, they reminded me definitely of The Clash. Some of the songs that stood out to me after a couple of listens: the first one, Willpower, actually very new wavy, I want to say, reminiscent of the Psychedelic Furs. The electric pop song that I mentioned earlier was Within Your Reach. Buck Hill, another one, stood out because it sounds like surf rock. It's an instrumental. And I guess, yeah, Take Me Down to the Hospital is more of the bluesy number. But all in all, I guess this was a great start for me. I guess starting off with their second album, I definitely will venture in further and deeper into their catalog. Looking forward to dive into them. And what else can I say? The quality. No issues on the jacket. Packed as your usual Vinyl Me Please mailer. The vinyl, flat, silent, no issues there. I have nothing to compare it to, but it sounds very good to me. So if you do own an original, I'd like to know your thoughts, and if you've had this as well, please leave your feedback in the comments below. So I guess that kind of wraps it up for the first release of the month, Hootenanny by The Replacements. And now let's take a look at the selection in the Essentials category. Like I mentioned earlier, Fleetwood Mac, the self-titled album. Let's take a look at the album cover. As you can see, it's matte finish, unlike the Hootenanny that we saw, which was glossy. This one is matte finish, but we do have nice spot varnish here on, I don't know if you can see it, on the lettering. Kind of hard to speak. And the rear cover with the Essentials logo. Heavy cardstock tip-on jacket. As usual, the presentation is spectacular by Vinyl Me Please. As I mentioned earlier, no more hype sticker, but we do have the Obi. And it tells us that it was cut from an analog source. It says master tapes, and we'll get into that in a minute, by Ryan K. Smith at Sterling Sound. There is an interesting color choice, and what do they call it exactly? Just black and white. And there's a booklet, which we'll take a look at, and a wonderful photo. So let's take a look at the vinyl first. Polyline sleeve, thank you Vinyl Me Please. Almost looks like a black and white cookie. And we have the Reprise orange, yellow, orange labels, like the original. And the original also had a inner sleeve which had lyrics, so they reproduced that on an insert, just like the original. The photo, beautiful photo, heavy cardstock of the band, and the booklet. The booklet, not that many additional photos, actually none, because this is the rear album cover photo, and basically the essay is black on white text, no additional photos. Now let's talk a little bit about the album. The second self-titled, because there was originally, earlier in their career, they did have an album called Fleetwood Mac. Different members, but this is the second album called Fleetwood Mac. It came out in 1975. For those of you who don't know, I'll repeat the story. This is the first album with Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, probably the most popular lineup of Fleetwood Mac. The story goes that Mick Fleetwood was checking out Sound City recording studio, and Keith Olsen, the engineer, played him a couple of demos by Buckingham Nicks, as well as the album, beautifully recorded album Buckingham Nicks, which was the debut album of the duo Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. And it just so happens that actually Lindsey Buckingham was working on some other tracks while Mick Fleetwood was there. He met him, they clicked, really liked him, and almost asked him to join on the spot. And Lindsey Buckingham said, "I'll join only on one condition, that my girlfriend can also join." Well, Mick Fleetwood invited them, Mick Fleetwood, Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks, and the rest of the band out for dinner, for Mexican food. They spent about 3 hours at the restaurant, and they clicked, and they decided to invite them to join the band. The rest is history. Fleetwood Mac. This album almost plays like a greatest hits, almost plays like Rumors. Tons of important tracks on here. Rhiannon by Stevie Nicks, Say You Love Me by Christine McVie, I think are two of the singles. Sugar Daddy as well. Over My Head is a third single, I think it was, by Christine McVie. Landslide, the iconic, unforgettable Landslide by Stevie Nicks. And they reinterpret, or actually re-record, a track that was on the Buckingham Nicks album called Crystal, written by Stevie Nicks, but sung by Lindsey Buckingham. Fantastic album. It went on to sell 7 million albums, but this was like I don't want to call it a sleeper hit. It took them, I want to say 16 or 18 months from when the album was released in 1975 to when it actually went to number one in August, I think it was, August or July of 1976. After constant and heavy touring by the band, finally, the fruits of their labor came to fruition, I guess. I love this album, and I promised you I was going to talk a little bit briefly about a comparison that I did with another version that I have. The version that I have is a double 45, double album cut at 45 by Chris Bellman. And I've learned only recently that the source was actually a one-to-one copy tape. Now, kind of unclear as to what source Vinyl Me Please used, because I also learned that on another live stream with someone from Rhino was saying that there were issues with the master tapes of this album. So makes sense that Chris Bellman cut from the one-to-one copy back in 2012. Not mentioned here, it just says master tapes. Doesn't say if it's a first generation or a second generation, but it is all analog as we see here. The 2012 was released on Record Store Day, and it was actually a very nice packaging, heavy cardstock jacket, tip on as well. Gatefold this time, where the inner sleeve was reproduced in the gatefold. And I thought this was numbered, it is not. Pressed at Palace, and great pressing. My thoughts. I first put on the Vinyl Me Please. I hadn't listened to the 2012 in a long time. So I put on the Vinyl Me Please version, which is cut at 33 RPM. And my initial reaction was, wow, this sounds really good. Nice bottom end and nice soundstage. I was like really impressed. They really did a good job. Then I pulled out the double 45. And here is where I was like, oh, that's different. So my thoughts on this. I was expecting the double 45 typically are cut a bit louder. Actually, it's slightly lower in volume than the 33. I think the 33 is cut a little bit louder, just a little bit. I had to adjust the volume setting down a bit whenever I was comparing to this, track by track. And so my thoughts, and this is just my personal listening experience on my system. Everyone will have a different opinion. Everyone will have a different listening experience, but these are just my impressions and my opinion. So the vocals are the first thing that stood out to me. The vocals on the double 45 sound smoother. On the Vinyl Me Please, I want to say they're a bit brighter, but not brighter in the top end, more on the mids. And the vocals seem more upfront, like almost really upfront compared to the rest of the music. The vocals on this one seem to be more organically woven in the whole context of the song, of the music. I don't have an original copy from the time from 1975. So I'm interested to know if that's how it sounded back then. Maybe if someone does have that, please leave notes in the comment. And what else did I notice? The bass. I noticed this has a lot of bass, the double 45, as one would expect for sure. I don't want to say that the bass on the 33 Vinyl Me Please is more, it just seems a little punchier. And it could be the perception of when you're listening to the music, that because other elements of the music may appear like the voices seem a little bit louder, maybe that influenced what I perceived regarding the bass. But it seems a little bit punchier. Not to say that this one is muddy by any means. If you listen to this, I don't think that the bass or the bottom end is at all muddy. But the biggest difference that I noticed is the soundstage. I found that the soundstage on the double 45 was a little bit deeper. I noticed that on some of the drums, as well as the placement of the voices and some of the guitars. And I find that the double 45 also has maybe a little bit more detail. I noticed some percussions, I think tambourine or something, seemed to be better placed and more defined on this one versus the Vinyl Me Please. Now, final thoughts. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. Better is very subjective. I can only say I'm going to keep the Vinyl Me Please. The presentation of the package is phenomenal. And I like that it's on 33. I don't have another copy on 33. I don't have an OG, and I don't have any other of the subsequent reissues that have been done. I like the idea of listening to the album at 33 with only 2 sides instead of 4. But I definitely prefer the sound that I hear on the double 45 versus the Vinyl Me Please. It's all subjective. You may not have the same opinion as me, and that's totally fine because I don't have the same system that you guys have, nor the same ears. But in the end, this is a very, very good pressing, very spectacular presentation. I highly recommend it if you cannot get a hold of the double 45. So I guess that wraps it up for the Vinyl Me Please selections or records of the month for the month of February 2024. The self-titled Fleetwood Mac and Hootenanny by The Replacements. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please give it a thumbs up. If you have additional information or want to share your thoughts about either one of these two albums, please leave a comment below. And if you like what you saw and you want to see more, please consider subscribing. It is free. You don't have to pay anything, and hit that notification button so that you will be alerted of future content that is dropped on my channel. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.